I admire Margaret Sanger enormously.
Hillary Clinton only admires Margaret Sanger because she was a feminist.
Her courage, her tenacity, her vision.
Courage and tenacity are good human qualities. They are not feminist qualities. Visions are subjective.
And when I think about what she did all those years ago in Brooklyn, taking on archetypes, taking on attitudes and accusations flowing from all directions, I am really in awe of her. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from her life and from the cause she launched and fought for and sacrificed so greatly.
Now, I've long maintained that the sound of the end of civilization is the snooty, so much more morally advanced and reeking of condescension, toffee-nosed BBC correspondent and their utterly self-loathing progressive hatred of humans in general and Western civilization in particular. Yet
that description could even apply to the following film, whose narration sounds like a script that could have been written by Hillary Clinton.
What is the special quality of Margaret Sanger? Above all, strength and purpose. Having selected her goal, and none could be more important for our world.
Subjectivity, propaganda film. Stopping human reproduction is not a good thing, not even under the guise of ending poverty.
Nothing could deter her from pursuing it.
Relentlessly pursuing a goal can be a good thing, but not necessarily. It all depends on the goal. It all depends on the person. Sometimes it can be very good. Sometimes it can be very bad. Dictators pursue their goals too.
What is the background from which this extraordinary woman emerged? Corning, New York, late 19th century. Population of the United States around 50 million. 1/4 of what it is today. Her father, an independent free thinker.
No, he was an atheist, and they do not have a monopoly on free thought.
11 children in all. A mother who died young.
Who was also a free thinker and a Christian. But it was common to have big families back then, and it was also common to die younger.
Margaret wanted to be a doctor. She had to settle on being a nurse.
It's not good enough to simply say she chose to be a nurse. We've got to put in there that women were not allowed to be doctors in that era. Gotta make sure to get that feminist propaganda in there. Back in those days, you could be discriminated against just for having the wrong last name, whether you were a man or a woman.
Hearth and home interrupted her career.
Which had to be dreadfully inconvenient on her life because, as everyone knows, a woman must always choose between a house and a home or a career. She cannot have both. And it is always honorable to choose the career. Bull crap.
But not her development.
As if family, house, and home were just obstacles to be overcome in order to become a real woman and fulfill her destiny. Or that is how feminists would have people believe.
It was during this period that she became familiar with the feminists.
They were always more interested in advancing women's rights, not equal rights for everyone. The Planned Parenthood propaganda film moves out of her sad backstory life and goes into how she was traumatized by all the poverty she witnessed and how it compelled her to start the birth control movement and Planned Parenthood. It paints her in a very glorious light, but it leaves out a few things.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world.
People have taken this quote and run with it, saying something to the effect of, Margaret Sanger thinks that children are sin. That's not what she said. Let's listen to the rest of the quote.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
Well, that all sounds very good. Nobody wants to bring children into the world on purpose if they're going to suffer or if they're going to be unwanted. But that's not the whole story. There is a much, much darker side, to Margaret Sanger.
This is Margaret Sanger, president of America's Planned Parenthood Federation, maintains that European women should stop having babies for the next 10 years.
Don't you think such a theory, such a radical theory, is antisocial?
On the contrary, it seems to me that it is more practical and humane.
What about the women who want babies now and in 10 years will not be able to have babies? Rather impractical, don't you think?
Oh, John, you do ask hard questions. I should think that instead of being impractical, it is really very practical and intelligent and humane.
Now, if Mrs. Slee seems a little cold-blooded to you, you might perhaps know Miss Margaret Higgins better from the name of her first husband, who was William Sanger.
But Mrs. Slee, in this country, having babies is the only thing left which is both unrationed and untaxed. Do you think we really ought to stop?
Well, I suppose a subject like that is really so personal that it's entirely up to the parents to decide. But from my view, I believe that there should be no more babies.
No more babies, regardless of status, rich or poor. No more babies. That is a far cry from claiming to fight disease and poverty. Margaret Sanger was pro-abortion. She was not pro-choice.
Well, just in the way she says the word humane. Humane. You know that it's not humane.
You heard Planned Parenthood feminist icon Margaret Sanger tell this decent and concerned British gentleman who was wondering about the emotional effects on women postponing their childbearing years past their ability to have children as the intelligent and the humane thing to do. Not a pip of concern for their emotional well-being, just social engineering to one person's ideal, as cold and as uncaring as from the mouth of a reptile. This is the woman who set the standards for being a woman in the minds of 21st century progressives.
It's fascinating. For years and years, there have been two messages for Planned Parenthood advocates and the other organizations that do the same thing. One message is for the masses, and that is freedom, liberty for women. That is choice for women, the ability to do what you want with your own body. The other message has been for the fundraising circuit. And the fundraising circuit hears the message of, if those people keep having babies at that rate, they are going to dominate our society and it's going to go down the tubes. You don't want those kind of people replicating like that, do you? How would you like to make a contribution so that we can send out the message that women have a right to choose what they do with their own body?
Wait, those people? Who are those people?
Sanger's admiration for the eugenics programs of Nazi Germany were well known at the time. In 1933, the Birth Control Review published Eugenic Sterilization, an Urgent Need, by Ernst Rudin, who was Hitler's director of genetic sterilization and the founder of the Nazi Society for Racial Hygiene. In her praise for the eugenics programs in Germany, Sanger called for the implementation of such programs in the United States, specifically targeting African Americans. The following editorial was published in the 1932 issue of the Birth Control Review.
The Negro problem is one of the most complicated and important confronting America. Whatever the ultimate answer may be, such an attitude brings to light the function of birth control as a necessary agency in its solution. The present submerged condition of the Negro is due in large part to the high fertility of the race under disastrously adverse circumstances. Thus, the question arises, to what extent birth control has had a eugenic effect upon the Negro race?
If any question should remain about Sanger's racist agenda, a 1939 letter she wrote to Dr. Clarence Gamble should remove all doubt.
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is a man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members.
Can there be any wonder why Planned Parenthood opens its facilities in poor inner-city neighborhoods populated by minorities? Can there be any doubt that Sanger's philosophy of creating a pure race is what fuels Planned Parenthood's support of embryonic stem cell research? Margaret Sanger was a racist.
Woman of valor.
I can think of 2 women off the top of my head who would be a lot more deserving of a book with that title, Woman of Valor. Mother Teresa, Princess Diana. They were not racists. They were not anti-choice. They were not feminists. They were true humanitarians.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously.
I believe that there should be no more babies.
Her courage, her tenacity, her vision.
I believe that there should be no more babies.